Over the last few weeks, I've slowly been chipping away at the 69 Camaro body and paint refresh. So this was a car that had been restored almost 30 years ago, back in 1996. And a good friend of mine asked me to basically do a repaint on it. There was some peeling and some problems with some adhesion on some of the parts. So anyway, we decided to go ahead and do a repaint on it. It's always nice when these come into the shop and all I've got to do is a little bit of body work and not a lot of metal work. So I realized that I hadn't really provided much of an update on this, so I thought I would just do a quick update here, let you know where things stand and what I've been doing. So I originally, before I did anything on it, I started off by guide coating it with 180 grit and 220 grit on a block, just to really see how straight the original job was. And for the most part, it wasn't too bad. There were just a couple of little spots here. The skin has been put in back behind there. So there were just a few spots that had shown up during the blocking. Normal shrinkage here in the quarter panels, the cell panel here, the quarter panel seam where the quarter and the roof meet. Probably not super noticeable, but you can see I've got a little bit of skim work in here, and this is just super thin. I mean, I could probably come in here with some 180 grit and sand that off in about 30 seconds, but there was just a little bit of shrinkage right here where that lead seam is. So went ahead and got that cleaned up for him. And just a couple little spots on the roof, no big deal. I think there were just really two spots that I had to kind of skim in on the roof, and then there were a couple of high spots that I came in and cleaned up. And then the doors looked pretty good too. So like I said, I started off just with some 180 and 220 to kind of see where things stand. And the nice thing is that I didn't have to really break out the actual body filler. All of this stuff is glazing filler. So it's like a dolphin glaze or a finishing glaze in most of these places. So again, not very much filler work was needed at all. The front clip here is fiberglass, and as you can see, I've done a lot of work here, a lot of blocking. Fiberglass is inherently wavy, and hopefully I've got it pretty straight. We'll find out once I do the first blocking of a 2K here. So yeah, not too bad. The nice thing about the finishing glaze is that you can put it straight on top of primer or paint. If you're using regular body filler, you really need to be on epoxy or bare metal. So that's the nice thing about the finishing glaze, is that you can actually go over paint and primer. Granted that you put the correct amount of scratch in there, so maybe 120 grit or 150 grit scratch for your glaze. Passenger side quarter looked real good. Again, same situation here, just with a little bit of shrinkage down in the lead seam here. So probably should have just dug all of that out and redid it, but no big deal. And then just a little bit of touch-up. So as you can see, as we just kind of come around the car, most of it's just little bitty touch-up stuff. There was some repair work that was done in the door corners. So there's a little bit more filler work in those areas. And then again, the fender here. So, no big deal. I did go ahead and clean up the A-pillars a little bit. They had just a little bit of wave in them. Probably a factory thing, but I went ahead and got those straightened up. And then I've got the fiberglass hood sitting over here against the bubble top. And again, most of this is just skim work, and it's really just because that fiberglass is so wavy. I'm not going to chase it too far. I'm just going to try to get it as straight as possible and try to get everything pretty subtle so that nothing stands out as great big gaps or big old dents. None of these big gaping dents or low spots in the fiberglass, but it's going to probably have just a little bit of wave. Again, I'm not going to chase it forever. And then one of the other things I did is I did do a little bit more work back here in the tail pan section. So my buddy needed to replace this part, and so he just replaced the lower part, spliced it in. It looks really good, to be honest. But as you can see, the factory panel needed a little bit of skim work. So again, those are just little bitty dings and imperfections in the stamping, and they're all just skim coats. Nothing serious there. The one panel that's gonna need the most work is the deck lid. So when I was scuffing the deck lid, I started to see surface rust underneath the primer. And I originally talked to my buddy. We were just going to make the best of it and treat the metal that was exposed and leave everything else. But the more that I sanded on it, the more rust I was finding. So I decided to go ahead and strip the thing down to bare metal. And I just use 80 grit on my rotary sander. You could use a DA, but it'll take forever. So I just put 80 grit on a rotary sander and I stripped the entire panel. What we found underneath was kind of interesting because there were some pretty serious dings. I mean, some real serious dings in the deck lid. So they had probably 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch of filler in those. They didn't pull them or spoon them or anything. They just left them. And then there was a whole bunch of issues in here, and I can still feel there's a little bit of rippling here in the deck lid. And there were some holes that were filled, I think, from a spoiler, and I went ahead and fixed those up, and so I think we're gonna be in a lot better shape now that we stripped it down to bare metal. I've treated the bare metal with Picklix 20, which is a metal conditioner that I really like using. And then I just came in and pulled everything. So I got in here where this big ding was, and I pulled it out. And I pulled a ding here, and then there were quite a few dings all through here. This was really rough, really bad shape. That had a ton of filler in it, and I've pulled it out the best that I can. It's still gonna need a little bit of work. And there were some spots in here. You can see this darker shade here. I didn't dig into that. I have a feeling that might be rotted out. I'm not sure, but again, talking with my buddy, we just wanted to do a quick repaint on here. I do have a couple of 69 Camaro deck lids laying around. I've got a new one that we could have thrown on here, but to be honest, this thing fit pretty darn good. So I didn't want to really mess around with having to do any customization or fabrication work on an aftermarket deck lid. So yeah, I've just come in here and I've went ahead and done a little bit of Dynaglass, some kitty hair, straight on the bare metal in a few spots, as you can see. And what we'll end up doing is I'm gonna epoxy this today, and then tomorrow I'm gonna come back and put body filler over the epoxy in some of the areas that need the body work. And then we'll just continue to do some work on it. But again, that's just simply because the metal wasn't worked. It was just, body filler was just slapped in a lot of the big dings. So we're gonna get that fixed. And like I said, we're gonna have a lot less body filler in it. So today, really the focus here is to get the deck lid and the rockers epoxied. The rockers are in bare metal. They're treated with Picklix. We're gonna get those treated with epoxy. Then I'm gonna walk around and maybe just spot hit some of my bare metal spots. It'd probably be okay with 2K straight over those smaller spots, but I'm gonna come in and hit them with epoxy since I'll have epoxy in the gun. Won't need to do that on the fiberglass front end. And from there, like I said, we'll put body filler over the epoxy tomorrow where needed, and then I'll also hit all of my spot areas with some 2K, and then we'll block that out in a few days. So what I like to do in these types of situations is I actually do like to come in and just hit my filler or my skim work real quick with a couple coats of 2K. I'll block it out. It should be fine, and then we'll come in and we'll 2K the entire car. I'll probably reduce the 2K because I don't need a lot of build at this point, so I'll probably reduce it 10 to 20%, and we'll get 2 coats of 2K on there after I do the spot blocking. Like I said, I'm gonna come in here and hit this with 2K, sand it in a couple days. We'll do that in anywhere that there's body filler. We'll hit just the body filler areas, the skim work. We'll block that out, and then we'll shoot the entire car in reduced 2K, and then I'll block it out with 220 or 320. I might actually start with 180 just to make sure I cut it good and level. Finish it in 220, buzz it with 320 after that, and then we'll come in, we'll put one last coat of reduced 2K, and that will be the last coat. Assuming no additional skim work needs to be done, that'll be the last coat of 2K. before we are ready to wet sand and shoot base and clear. So stay tuned. We'll provide a couple more updates, hopefully, if I don't forget. And hopefully the Camaro will be done in a few weeks.